Welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has held high-level talks with Blair and Kushner on post-war Gaza plans as Israel intensifies pressure on Gaza City. This comes as Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar meets Marco Rubio in Washington, D.C. to discuss US-Israel relations. As reports of starvation in Gaza raise concerns, the United Nations report now claims that Gaza's famine is man-made. Israel has meanwhile rejected the claims and called for removal of the statement. Russian strikes on Kyiv have killed 3, including a child, while 9 people have been injured. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has now said that 5 people are hospitalized and residential buildings are suffering significant damage as authorities assess the aftermath. Well, leaders such as Emmanuel Macron, Merz and Tusk are now to meet President Sandu on Moldova's Independence Day. The leaders have pledged strong support for the country's path to joining the EU, stating that the door to Europe remains wide open. US envoy Tom Barak has cancelled his trip to southern Lebanon after Hezbollah supporters protested his visit. This comes amid Hezbollah's talks for disarmament. 2 children aged 8 and 10 have been killed and 17 people injured in a shooting in Minneapolis, where a gunman opened fire on school children attending Mass at a Catholic school. US authorities have called the attack an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. Tehran has warned that any move to trigger snapback sanctions directly affects cooperation with the IAEA, while it stresses that the return of inspectors does not mean full resumption of ties. French Prime Minister has warned against snap legislative polls. He has compared the country's finances to a leaky boat. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has defended his government and offered full support to the embattled Prime Minister. Alright viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus this hour. We're now learning that in Washington, US President Donald Trump convened a Gaza policy meeting at the White House with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and former envoy Jared Kushner. Now, the session focused on the Gaza humanitarian crisis, hostage negotiations and controversial post-war redevelopment plans, including proposals previously condemned as ethnic cleansing by the United Nations. At the State Department, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar. The two reaffirmed strong bilateral ties focusing on Gaza, Lebanon, Syria and countering Iran's influence. At the UN, meanwhile, Israel's ambassador Danny Danon stated that more information is expected soon on a deadly strike at the Al Nasser hospital that killed at least 20 people, including 5 journalists. The IDF claims that the site was used by Hamas, although none of the journalists were named amongst the militant targets. Joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Rohan Gunaratne. He is an international affairs expert joining us live from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. High-octane developments taking place in Washington, D.C., even as the Middle East is on the boil. Trump chairing a crucial meeting focusing on post-war development plans in Gaza. Another meeting between the Israeli Foreign Minister and Marco Rubio has also taken place. Where do you see the war heading to next? Because it does not seem that Netanyahu is backing down from his offensive in Gaza. Mr. Gunaratne, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Pia.
Yes,
it's
please
very
go ahead.
good to hear from you. What we have seen is that the Prime Minister of Israel is determined to move towards the conquest of Gaza. So we have seen Israeli troops moving, Israeli military conducting attacks on important targets. We have also seen one very unfortunate incident where the Nasser hospital was attacked and 5 journalists and health workers were killed. Israel claimed that 6 Hamas terrorists were also killed in that same attack. What is clear is that there is a crisis that is developing, that is, many governments are saying that there isn't enough food in Gaza and that this war is going to lead to a starvation. But what we can also see is that the Hamas has taken control of the flow of food and other essential supplies into Gaza. So it's a challenge of distributing the relief supplies to the people of Gaza. It is not lack of food or lack of other supplies. Finally, what we all need to understand is that Hamas still can stop this operation by releasing the hostages. Hamas is still holding on to 51 living hostages and fallen hostages. So there should be equal pressure on Hamas to release these hostages so that Gaza as a city will not be destroyed. Israel is currently preparing to clear Gaza, and that means Gaza city will be destroyed sooner or later. And Hamas will have to take the blame for it because Israel has several times said that they want a comprehensive solution, meaning not just releasing 10 hostages, but releasing all the hostages.
Indeed, and since you referred to the famine, I have some interesting developments related to that is coming in right now. I request you to stay on with us. We're now learning that in Gaza, Palestinians were seen fleeing the Saftawi neighborhood of Jabalia, moving south towards Gaza City as Israeli forces have intensified operations on the city outskirts. This comes even as the humanitarian crisis continues to escalate, with the UN warning of a famine. Let's in fact listen in to what one of the Gazans has had to say.
وين نروح وين نيجي يا عالم؟ خلص بكفي ارحمونا، والله تعبنا، اولادنا صغار، لا قادرين نحمل اولاد ولا قادرين نحمل اغراض ولا قادرين نمسك اي شيء. وين نروح؟ فيش مكان امن في غزه نقعد فيه.
Meanwhile, Israeli tanks and troops were spotted near the Gaza border with thick plumes of smoke rising from within the enclave. Now, the military of Israel says that it has re-entered the Jabalia area in recent days in order to dismantle militant tunnels and solidify control. Mr. Rohan Gunaratne is still with us on the broadcast. Sir, we've gotten fresh information that the Israeli troops are now in Jabalia. They're moving south towards Gaza City, even as forces have intensified their operations in the city outskirts. Meanwhile, we do know that the US is also keeping a very close eye on these particular developments. What role do you think the US has? Can the US convince Netanyahu in order to maybe not escalate even further? Is it in their interest to do so? Because there are several allies of Israel, from European countries to even Australia, who are now calling out the dire humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Gaza.
United States under President Trump is supporting Netanyahu's plan for the dismantling of Hamas and the other terrorist groups in Gaza. There are still 2 brigades of Hamas that is active, and IDF is determined to dismantle those 2 brigades. So we will see in the next few days stepped up Israeli operations, because Hamas refused a request for a comprehensive deal, meaning release of all the hostages and surrendering and disarming itself. So we will be witnessing more intense activity. There will be, of course, Hamas deaths, but also, unfortunately, there will be many civilian deaths in the coming days. What is important is for countries like the UAE, Jordan, and other countries that have airdropped food and other relief supplies to continue to do so, so that there will be no humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza.
Indeed, and taking a bird's eye view also of the situation, I also want to talk about the northern front and the war that has been raging on as far as Lebanon is concerned as well. Israel did give an ultimatum to Lebanon in order to ensure that the Hezbollah is disarmed. The US also spoke of talking to authorities in Lebanon in order to draw up a plan by the 31st, but now a US envoy Tom Barak has cancelled his trip to southern Lebanon after there were certain supporters of the Hezbollah who had come out to protest his visit. Do you think that such a plan could catalyze in the near future, because Hezbollah has come out and stated that they are not going to be disarming themselves?
Yeah, you're correct. Tom Barak just now cancelled the trip to Lebanon, but I want to tell you that the United States is fully engaged in building the capacities and the capabilities of the Lebanese military so that the military can take on the Lebanese Hezbollah. Of course, Israel will continue to strike any build-up of Lebanese Hezbollah, especially in southern Lebanon. But there is overall positive movement, good news in Lebanon, that is the Prime Minister and the President and many political leaders want to build a post-Hezbollah Lebanon, meaning they have minimized the Iranian influence that funded Hezbollah and create a Lebanon that is free of Hezbollah military capabilities.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Gunaratna, for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World today. Meanwhile, we're shifting focus away from the Middle East towards another region which is on the boil. Yes, I'm referring to the Russia-Ukraine war. We're now learning that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has stated that he will meet with Ukrainian representatives in New York this week. Meanwhile, Washington continues to talk to Russia as the U.S. seeks to end Moscow's war. Meanwhile, Witkoff has stated that he's meeting with the Ukrainians this week in New York, and he's called it a big signal. He has stated that they do talk to the Russians every day, and has added that he thought that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to end the war. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced his official meet with representatives of US President Donald Trump in New York as part of intensified mediation efforts to end the war with Russia. Let's in fact hear what Zelensky has had to say.
В п'ятницю Сполучені Штати Америки, Нью-Йорк, зустрічі з командою президента Трампа. Будуть залучені всі, хто працює над змістом безпекових гарантій. Військові, політичні, економічні компоненти гарантій безпеки. Завдання – прискоритись максимально, щоб це було теж важелем впливу. Росіяни мають бачити, наскільки серйозно світ налаштований та наскільки поганими будуть наслідки для Росії, якщо війна буде продовжуватись.
All right there, viewers, we've heard what exactly Zelensky has had to say. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast this morning is Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a defense expert joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. A lot of high-octane developments are taking place even as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Several meetings are taking place, conversations are taking place over phone lines. Steve Witkoff slated to meet Ukrainian representatives in New York later this week. Washington and Moscow are maintaining contact, yet we have not seen any sort of meeting, any sort of trilateral catalyzing up until now. There was a lot of murmur earlier about Budapest being chosen as one of the locations, then reports coming in that Turkey and even the Gulf nations were being roped in order to find a possible location to set up this meeting. Yet, Kremlin then came out yesterday evening and rejected any prospects of talks, especially if the security guarantees involve troops being on the ground, NATO troops being on the ground in Ukraine. So where do you see this headed next?
Well, Pia, absolutely. While the efforts are on to end this war, especially President Trump is steering the process, but as we all know, that it appears that President Putin is not very serious. The way he has deflected the trilateral talks, the way the campaign is going on in Ukraine, and even the missiles and drone attacks are going on, I think President Putin is not very keen to come on the table, at least on the trilateral meeting, for simple reason because he has laid a couple of stated his red lines. And first and foremost is that any negotiation can take place only when there is a security guarantee. Secondly, he wants Ukraine to be demilitarized. He wants to have a guarantee that the NATO option for Ukraine is off the table. And more importantly, he wants to enlarge the territorial gains. And that's why probably he is not very keen to come on the trilateral meeting. At the same time, I think President Trump and the European Union have realized that this war is not going to end anytime soon. And so therefore they have worked out a new mechanism to provide arms to Ukraine, especially the air defense system, so that Ukraine can defend itself. And on the Ukrainian Independence Day, the European leaders had gone and Chancellor Merz and also the Canadian Prime Minister have promised that the required aid will be given, and like Patriot missiles, other defense systems. So, Pia, all I can say is that while the efforts on by President Trump to end this war, but it's not going to end anytime soon because President Putin is not inclined until the conditions that he laid are met, and which, of course, are unacceptable to Ukraine as also to the European Union and America. Pia.
Indeed, and we've seen some recent comments also come out from the US administration, especially with regards to this war. In the latest, one of the advisors of Donald Trump, Navarro, has now come out and stated that this war is Modi's war, which is quite interesting because since day one, India has advocated for peace. India has advocated for all parties to come to the negotiating table in order to find a solution through dialogue. What do you make of this statement from the Trump administration?
Well, I think India had taken a very considered stand that the war should be resolved through dialogue, and fighting is not the option. And that's what Prime Minister Modi had stated, that this is not the era of war. But I think India doesn't have much of clout to directly, either mediate or influence Russia or Ukraine, because there are other players who are in the game, and the main player is President Trump. And secondly is that America has taken a very, I would say, lopsided stand that India is fueling the war by buying oil from Russia, which is not exactly the case, because there are other people like China who are buying much more oil. So therefore, at this time, now finger pointing at India very obliquely is not fair, because India is not the main player which is funding the war in Ukraine, and that is by buying Russian oil. So I think that these statements are off the cuff. What really matters is India's considered stand that the war should end and it should be through dialogue, and that position remains unchanged. But ironically, what America, Trump and his advisors are actually finger pointing is not right, because India has only very limited role. Yes, we can approach Putin and approach Zelensky, but the main architect to actually steer the process is President Trump and the other players in the European Union.
All right, sir, I request you to stay on with us. We're getting more reports Reports are coming in that the Ukrainian capital Kyiv has come under a mass nighttime Russian attack with at least 3 dead, including a child. 12, aged 12, who's been injured, and damage has also occurred in buildings in several districts as well. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has stated that 2 children were injured and added that 2 high-rise apartment buildings had been damaged in the eastern suburbs of the city. Major General Gigi Dwivedi is still with us on the broadcasts. Yesterday, what's interesting is that there were strikes that were reported on civilian infrastructure, particularly gas and energy infrastructure. Today as well, we are seeing buildings being attacked in Ukraine, civilians including 2 children now being injured and 1 also losing their life. Amidst all of this, a lot of the discourse around the war in Ukraine, especially from the US, is focused on the arms and focused on the Russian, the territory that Russia has gained, and not really upon attacks on civilian infrastructure. Why do you think the Trump administration is not taking this up as much?
Well, Pierre, first and foremost, as I stated in my previous intervention, that Russia is not keen to end the war because Putin feels that he is winning and he wants to gain as much territory as possible. He already controls about 20%. He wants complete Donbass. That means that it would be almost 30%. The second point is that Russia is targeting the civilian infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, basically to bring pressure on Ukraine, and especially the Ukrainian population. And that's why they have been targeting through the missile and drones the Ukrainian energy infrastructure and also the civilian infrastructure. I think America has taken a slightly lukewarm view of all this because the simple reason is that they want to get around Putin, and President Trump is himself leading the process. But the issue is that this is a humanitarian issue, because you are targeting the civilians, you are causing casualties, children are being targeted. Well, this must be taken on very strongly, that this is not the way the wars are fought, and you cause a humanitarian crisis. I think all I can say is that Russia is not going to end the war anytime soon. They are going to target energy infrastructure in Ukraine and also the civilian infrastructure so that they are able to bring pressure to Ukraine and so that they come on the negotiation table on terms what President Putin has laid down. Pia.
All right, sir, I request you to stay on with us. More news coming in from Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk have joined Independence Day celebrations in Moldova. The visit took place at a crucial time, with Moldova heading towards parliamentary elections on the 28th of September. The ruling party seeks a majority in order to preserve the country's pro-European path, but faces strong competition from pro-Russian forces. Let's in fact hear what French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk had to say.
Mâine, Uniunea noastră europeană va fi mai puternică împreună cu Moldova. Iar Moldova va fi și ea în Europa mai puternică și mai prosperă împreună. Vom scrie un nou capitol din istorie Moldovei și a Europei.
Die Tür in die Europäische Union ist offen. Sie sind uns in dieser Europäischen Union von ganzem Herzen willkommen. Moldau ist nicht nur geografisch, sondern auch historisch Teil der europäischen Familie.
Pokój, dobrobyt i bezpieczeństwo Unii i jej państw członkowskich są powiązane z pokojem, dobrobytem i bezpieczeństwem Mołdawii. Europa będzie silniejsza z Mołdawią.
All All right, viewers, you've heard what the European leaders have had to say. Meanwhile, still with us on the broadcast is Major General Gigi Dwivedi. This is a very interesting development because Moldova is currently on the path to EU membership. It applied in 2022. It was granted candidate status as well. We do know Moldova is a former Soviet republic as well. So how do you think this will now impact the already fragile EU-Russia equation?
Well, Pia, first and foremost, Moldova is the front-end state. Rightly so, it was part of Soviet Union. But after it got independence for 34 years back, so it's an independent state. It faces, I would say, hybrid threat from Russia, both in terms of territorial integrity. Part of it has already been, taken, I would say, already been annexed by Russia, and it faces a territorial integrity or sovereignty threat. And second is the elections, because now the elections are going to take place next week, and there are two parties. One is the pro-European Union party, which is the ruling party. On the other side is the pro-Russian party. And it is apparent that Russia is trying to influence these elections so that they have the government, which is pro-Russia. So therefore, the European Union leaders, especially Germany, French, they have made it on the Independence Day of Moldova to ensure that they have the full support and solidarity with the Moldovan people. Now, this is a very tense and a peculiar moment, because if the elections go in favor of Russia, then you will see that Moldova willy-nilly will come in the Russian influence. And at the same time, if the current ruling party wins, then they will be aligned more with the European Union. And for its security, Moldova has applied for the EU membership, because that will guarantee it security both from the hybrid threat as also from the territorial threat. We need to wait and watch, but Russia will do everything to ensure that its own favorable party comes to power. But I think we need to wait and watch. But it's a very, very crucial time for Moldova, because the future actually much is hinged upon how the elections go. Yeah.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for taking out time, sharing your perspective on these very crucial developments that are coming in right now from Europe. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting our focus towards what's transpiring in the United States of America. We're learning that a mass shooting at a Catholic school in South Minneapolis has left 2 children dead and 17 others wounded in what federal authorities are now investigating as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. The attacker has been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman. He opened fire at the school church as students attended morning mass. Westman fired dozens of rounds from a rifle, a shotgun and a handgun, all of which had been purchased legally. Listen in to what the Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara had to say.
At this point, we know we have a total of 19 victims from this tragedy. 2 were young children, ages 8 and 10, that were sitting in the pews at Mass when they were shot and killed. They were pronounced deceased on the scene. There were another 14 children between the ages of 6 and 15 that were injured by gunfire. There were also 3 adults in their 80s that were parishioners here attending Mass that were also shot in this incident. During the Mass, a gunman approached on the outside, on the side of the building, and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the Mass. Shooting through the windows, he struck children and worshipers that were inside the building. The shooter was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping. The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible.
The investigators have informed that students aged 8 and 10 were killed instantly. 14 other children and 3 adults, including elderly parishioners were injured as well. Investigators say that the shooter acted alone, and at least 2 church doors were found barricaded from the outside, indicating premeditation. And here is what the Minneapolis police chief had to say.
We believe it is one suspect, a sole shooter. We believe he is deceased. He is in his early 20s, does not have an extensive known criminal history, and we are looking through information left behind to try and determine some type of motive.
You've just heard the authorities confirm that Westman had no prior criminal record but had personal ties to the school as a former student. The police has also recovered additional weapons and writings from Westman's home, along with online videos posted to YouTube before the attack. Now, in the aftermath, US President Donald Trump has ordered all US flags to be flown at half-mast through August 31st and has posted condolences on social media. Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope, has also issued a statement expressing deep sorrow and prayers for the victims and the victims' families as well. The investigation currently remains ongoing. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Jim Rice, who's a professor of international law, joining us from Philippines. Thank you so much for taking out time, speaking to us on NewsX World. A tragic incident has taken place within the United States of America. Yet another mass shooting has come to light, this time targeting devout people at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. 2 children have lost their lives. 17 others have been injured. The attacker has been identified as a 23-year-old who is now deceased as well. Although the attacker did not have any prior criminal record, but he had personal ties to the school. We hear countless such incidents take place in the US every other day. What's really needed to ensure that such mass shootings do not take place, that innocent lives are not lost?
Well, again, your intro was spot on. Thanks for having me on. I couldn't agree with you more on your and presenting the facts and your assessment of the facts. If you ask me what I think should be done is, an immediate ban on assault rifles and serious restrictions on the possession of firearms. This individual seems to have had serious mental issues that is obvious, and the fact that he was able to obtain weapons, a shotgun, semi-automatic rifle, and a pistol is just simply inexplicable. The trouble is, though, of course, in the United States, the gun lobby, in the form of the National Rifle Association, has made millions and millions of dollars to countless, mostly Republican lawmakers, and there's just simply no political will for them to get serious about gun violence. Every time that there's an event like this, the response is thoughts and prayers. And now this idea of offering thoughts and prayers just seems to be mocking the victims and those survivors. So to answer your question, I would say serious and immediate gun control legislation.
Indeed, this is something that is in fact spoken a lot in America. It is something that also comes up, especially when the elections are around the corner, but we've yet to see legislation around this come to light. Of course, there's discussion on the Second Amendment as well that comes to light. Professor Rice, I request you to stay on with us. So we're shifting our focus to what exactly is transpiring in the Middle East. We're now learning that hundreds of people protested in southern Lebanon against US envoy Thomas Barak, forcing him to cancel his visit to Tyre and Kyiv. Protesters have waved Hezbollah and Amal flags, shouting anti-American slogans. Anger especially grew after Barak clashed with the Lebanese reporters in Beirut, telling them to act civilized. Now, comments many people found insulting. The presidency, in fact, supported the journalists. The US, meanwhile, seeks Hezbollah's disarmament as part of a truce deal with Israel, linking it to an economic development zone in southern Lebanon in order to reduce Hezbollah's Iranian funding. Now, locals see this as a threat to their land and are therefore resisting. Hezbollah, meanwhile, refuses to give up arms, and the Lebanese army will be presenting a disarmament plan on the 31st of August, according to the United States. Now, the visit shows that tensions between local resistance and what is being perceived as US intervention. Meanwhile, let's listen in to what exactly the US envoy has had to say.
Okay, wait. We're going to have a different set of rules, right? Please be quiet for a moment. And I want to tell you something. The moment that this starts becoming chaotic, like animalistic, we're gone. You want to know what's happening, act civilized, act kind, act tolerant, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region. So I beg you, do you think this is fun for us? Do you think this is economically beneficial for Morgan and I to be here putting up with this insanity? In cadence, with your kindness, your interest, and your thoughtful questions, we'll give you responses. If that's not how you'd like to operate, we're gone. Okay? Is that acceptable to everybody?
All right, there, of course, we've heard what exactly the US envoy had to say. Meanwhile, Professor Jim Rice still with us on the broadcast. There's a pushback that is taking place now within Lebanon against the US effort in order to reach a deal, a proper truce deal between Lebanon and Israel. Israel, of course, has demanded that Hezbollah be disarmed completely. The US is mediating, ensuring that a plan is chalked out by the Lebanese by the 31st of August. And now, with regards to how the US envoy Thomas Barak responded to journalists, that's not been viewed, that's not been perceived very kindly by the people within Lebanon, and locals have now protested in support of Hezbollah. What do you make of this development?
Summary of the issue. These are very, very serious issues in Lebanon and in the wider Middle East. And obviously what we saw today from Trump's hand-picked envoy is just a catastrophe, is just unacceptable. And these are the kinds of people that Trump has decided to put into positions of power during his second administration. As you know, other countries do, and as is the practice in other countries, they have a professional diplomatic corps, and these individuals are highly trained. They come up through years and years of experience, and when they finally reach the level of ambassador, they're very good at what they do. Unfortunately, what Trump has done, which he's done in many other aspects of government, is to try and eliminate the professional civil servants, those people who actually have expertise, and put his golfing and business cronies into positions of responsibility and power. And as we can see, it results in incompetence and arrogance and just, quite frankly, just shocking behavior.
And this has not gone down well with the Lebanese, who viewed this statement as condescending. Thank you so much, Professor Rice, for taking our time, speaking to us on NewsX World, providing your perspective on these developments from within the United States and from the Middle East. Meanwhile, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.